how do you make tracks, or how do people make tracks? How do you go about making tracks? All right, so I think it's important to kind of start from the beginning. I don't even know. That's still doing a lot. But you have to understand audio, and you know how to have to use your DAW. That's the biggest thing. Okay, so we've already talked about pretty much, what DAW to go with, which DAW is right for you, stuff like that. Now, once you've made that decision, now it's okay, how do we learn this thing? All right, there's a lot of things you can do. Obviously, you've probably, ended up here for a reason. So the second thing is, there's other resources out there. There's other guys like me, in particular to that software. The next thing is maybe buying a physical book on that, like a manual. You're looking for a manual. Honestly, they're good to have. You can reference them. You can go through and be like, oh, that's this. Otherwise, you're going to end up going through a lot of different Reddit forums trying to solve different problems, and that's good to go through for a specific problem. But when you're first getting in with your DAW, you got to find some way for you to understand what this is. And welcome. So I'm going to break it down with a couple of analogies, hopefully, maybe. But the biggest thing is to know how to use it. So there's two types of things. First off, your DAW is a program. It's like Microsoft Word, right? We talked about in the other video. It's the program that you put the sounds into, okay? You put the sounds into. And it mixes them together. So now I'm hesitating in saying mixes together because I feel like people use the term mix a lot. I'm gonna use it in the sense of mixing sounds together. There's a thing called mastering, and we'll get into that in the end. But we'll just use the word mixing we're mixing sounds together. So your DAW or your music program software is going to use two things. It's going to use audio and MIDI. Okay. So what that does is, we'll first start with audio. Audio is, what is audio? Like an audio file. Like, if you were to record a video, the sound that was recorded, that's a file. The sound that comes off of a vinyl, the sound that comes out of the speaker, it's as if it's a signal source of that, almost energy. It's almost like electricity. It's measured in the same type of realm. So it's just audio, okay? So you can put tons of audio in here, but back in the day, that was it. When you first started recording, let's say if you're like a band, right? Or bands back in the day, or even in, the first, Thomas Edison made the first phonograph. He was able to, make something that could produce sound and, replicate. So then studios blew up. So the start point we're going to use is like a rock band back in the day in like the 50s or 40s or even, 60s. Something where PAs were shitty, right? Whereas basically we had microphones, we had guitar, bass, some modern instruments, and we had the ability to plug things, but things weren't loud enough. When we started to first record things, it was just audio. So every track would record a piece of audio, either one by itself or together, onto a piece of tape, and those tapes would be combined into one, and that would be the master, and then that would go off to be pressed into a vinyl and stuff like that. But we'll get into that, in another whole video. But that's audio. Okay, so back in the day, people would just plug their audio source into a device to record. So let's say just this device, pre-computer, right? You put audio into it, you hit record, it records on one of these tape machines, boom, boom, boom. So when the computers came out in the 80s, they then needed to kind of communicate that audio with the computer. And that is going to be what's called MIDI, or MIDI, or musical instrument divided software. Let me look that shit up. What does MIDI stand for? Musical Instrument Digital Interface. I knew that, but I didn't know that. And now you know. Anyway. It was made by this guy named Dave Smith and this other Japanese guy named Ikutaro Kagehashi. But basically, these two guys pretty much were like, okay, one of the guys, Dave Smith, was really good at making synthesizers. He was just kind of booming. And the other guy pretty much was the MIDI guy, and they put these two things together. But anyways, what I'm saying is MIDI is basically information that's made in 0, 1, 0, 0, so it's binary, so similar to everything like the CD, the computer, your video game. It's binary information. So they were able to take this binary information and communicate it with audio, or audio to be able to communicate with binary information, vice versa. But basically, it's this little cable right here. This 5-pin looking guy. I can't even, drag this shit over. I have something with 5 pins on it, hang on. You get something like these guys right here. And they go in, and then they go out. Now, the best way to think of this is just key data. It sends the tempo, it sends what note to play, it sends the device to go on and off. It just sends everything but the sound. That's the best way to describe it. So, if you're first getting into it, and this is starting to sounding very overwhelming, we have audio, so that's just noise, that's the sound, and then we have MIDI, that's just data. That's the best way to think about it. The data can tell the audio, what to do. They can tell that specific audio, which is whatever color, whatever timbre it has, whatever pattern it should play at, whatever tempo it should play at, and how fast and how it should start and stop. So it can send all of that information to it. So you can then, and vice versa, I have a bunch of devices on my table. These devices, in theory, can send either information, sound, and patterns to each other to create something. But that's just MIDI. It's basically, the idea was originally, to get sound and the computer to become one. But more importantly, you could play a sound with the computer, or you could play a sound with them. They had modules after that were just these sounds in a little machine, kind of like these guys over here. And you would play with like this lightweight fake keyboard, because it was just a time of booming technology in the 80s, and Japan was popping as well too. And Dave Smith was the man with his synthesizers, so it just was a good part of history. It's a good thing to know these things. But back into the whole, okay, let's go to your DAW, right? You have audio, which is sounds that you can put in there, okay? So let's say you're a band. You can put your band sound, your guitar, your bass, your drums, into the program. So you may need some type of interface or a device that you can plug your sound into the computer, or you have already recorded it, and then you can, drag and drop a WAV file or something into your DAW. But either way, you're using sound with audio. Now, MIDI is going to take place where there's most likely a sound in the program, and you can send data even from this keyboard right here, down here, this guy. You can send data from there if you wanted to. Or this is a MIDI controller. There's no sounds in this, okay? It honestly also exists with the computer. But I can plug this in, and I can control not only the sounds, but I can control any aspect of the software, because there's a lot of MIDI-enabled buttons. There's buttons on the program that I can control with these buttons on here, So, but this is only sending data. This isn't sending sound. I can send the data from here into the program, select a sound, and let's say a piano sound, obviously because you have a piano here, and then it'll play a piano. The data goes, play this key, play it this as hard as I'm hitting it, and at this, if I'm playing with metronome or something like that, this tempo and timbre and whatever. So you can send that data into the program. It'll combine it to the program, right? And then you can do whatever you want with it. Now, in theory, you can also send your MIDI data into a sound, into an audio source, an audio that you put in there. You can control that with this. But that's a whole other discussion about what program you have and how to do that. But that would be just sampling in your DAW. That's another great thing. But where do you start? Where do you go? I'm trying to put myself more so in the aspect of like, what did I do in my first time? What did I do in my first time trying to make music and go into the DAW? It's so intimidating because you don't know anything. But start slow. I think the coolest thing is to make a bunch of little sounds. Make some drums, make some piano rolls, make some this, make some that, either with audio or without audio. But if you're more so into, and before we get kind of scattered into the whole, like, let's think how to produce, I want to just talk about if you're a band. Let's say if you're watching this because you want to learn how to produce or record for a band, even on like a basic scale, just to kind of get some reference down. So what you want to do is obviously get something to plug the audio into the computer. If you have that, you're going to set up this computer in the program similar to the way you would set up, hopefully you would set up roughly in the same way as you would set up a mixer in a live set. Maybe not with the same exact settings, but with the same principle involved, with same referencing, making sure all the levels are balanced, everybody's coming in, nobody's too louder than each other. And the more microphones you use and the more connections you can get in to the computer separately, the better it's probably going to sound, obviously, because the more the merrier, but you have to add a lot more skill and there's a lot more cost with that. So minimum, like if you can connect, all the 4 main instruments into the computer, then you can get rocking and rolling. And even if that's just, 4 dynamic mics in the room or 2 dynamic mics, one for the drummer, one for the vocalist, and then the other 2 are plugged in, that's possible. That is totally possible. And then you can have a MIDI going, but you also have to make sure your computer can handle this. You might have to, you could even get one of these handheld Tascam recorders. And honestly, I recommend that for a lot of people. I'll show you what it looks like real quick. Hang on. Okay, I whipped out 2 things. Oh yes, the accursed red box of doom. We'll talk about that. But first, I got hair on my face. Cat hair, honestly, too. But first, this thing right here, I think highly underrated, highly estimated, very versatile. For a lot of different things. And this is supposed to be a video about production. Now I'm going to ramble about how you should get this recorder. But first off is, if we talk about devices that you need to kind of get your audio into the computer, it's going to be an interface, which is something like this. Interface is also known as a sound card. It's basically what the computer uses to send audio in and out with, okay? So you're going to need, your computer has one one for the headphone jack. Hell, your Xbox has one for the headphones, has probably a sound card in it. But this one's very popular. This brand, these red guys, very reliable. Like they're like the Honda Civic, Toyota Corolla of interfaces, and they'll get the job done. I have one obviously under my desk as a backup. You never know. I started with it. It's great, and this one has 4 inputs, 4 outputs, and it's got some MIDI. So I can kind of get the job done with this, and then this is bare bones, all right? Bare bones. However, this guy right here. Now, for fancy talk, do I know the specs? If the specs on here are better than that, is the AD ratio, is the preamps, is this and that better? I don't know. Probably not. But I can record a whole room with this. You can record a live performance. You can bring this on the road on a gig. You can give this to the sound guy and be like, hey, can you just plug this into the board, hit record for me, and I'll give him an extra, buy him a drink or something. But this is very handy because it records the top audio. So if I want to maybe even do this cast out on like the road or at the park, maybe I'll do that one day. And we can talk into this. I can discreetly hide it, put a windscreen around it, or I can plug this microphone directly into here and do that action too. Now this also works as an interface too. It's got this USB out. You put it into interface mode and it does the same thing as this red box, but I can take this on the go. That's what's nice about this. I think if you're podcasting, a lot of people try to get you on this like huge board. Maybe this in a camera is going to be light years away from that. But that's another topic. I'll make a whole nother video about podcasting in my opinion. But these things are good. If you're a live band, might be one of your first interfaces if you can't go into the large ones. Otherwise, maybe the 4i4, they're kind of, I feel like in the same 200-ish price range. These things suck, dude. It's expensive. But, pitch in, do what you can. Wash some cars, do some dishes. But I think if you're just about to get something, I think this is going to kind of cut the cake for a lot of things. And you can sample, too. And, so we're talking, you can use it as an interface. You can use it as a live recorder. You can use it as a microphone combo or camera combo for podcast. You can even mount it on top of the camera too. So very versatile. So that's my opinion. But anyway, we'll segue back to the DAW. So once we covered how, I'm going to get audio into the computer, or I'm going to record it somewhere, and then I'm going to put it into the computer and make it sound pretty. That's fine. The next thing is, let's talk about because we were talking about being a band. If you're plugging everybody in, there's going to be a few ways to do it. If you have a large mixer, kind of like this, it's not large, I wouldn't call it large. Hang on.